had me at cello, cello. You had me at cello. You had me at cello. Oh, you had me at cello. Hello, everybody. Look at the time. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. And this week, I am delighted to have as my guest Diane Chaplin. Diane, how are things?
Things are great. I'm in Portland, Oregon.
All right. Well, I'm super glad you could join us. I'm very excited to find out. I've got a bunch of questions I'd love to ask you about, but first, for people who aren't yet familiar with you and your work, can you give a synopsis of how you got started on the cello and how you got to where you are?
Okay, I'm gonna make it as quick as possible because there's a lot of stuff. I'm from Los Angeles originally. My parents were both professional musicians, but in a teaching capacity. My mom was like the neighborhood piano teacher, and my dad taught music theory at the California Institute of the Arts. Which is a private music school north of Los Angeles. My elementary school music teacher brainwashed me into playing the cello when I was 8 years old. She would show me pictures and play me recordings of the cello and say, "Isn't this the most beautiful instrument?" And I had no idea what a cello was before that point, but I was tall. And musically, she knew I came from a musical family because she knew my mom. So I started playing the cello. It was immediately clear that this was the instrument for me because I'd already been playing the piano for about 4 years at that point and very middling piano student. I took off immediately on the cello and I had a really, really good teacher from the beginning because my parents being musicians and my dad teaching at Cal Arts, they were able to plug me into the teacher there. Fast forward, I got my undergraduate degree from Cal Arts because when your parent teaches there, you can go for free. And that was the primary reason so I got a free undergraduate education, and I studied with Cesare Pasquarella, who was the teacher in LA at that time. And then I went to Juilliard for my master's degree, which is a pretty competitive place to get into. So I practiced a lot through my high school and undergraduate years. And I had really kind of had in my idea from a pretty early age that I would do something soloistic in my life. It was impressed upon me that I had that ability. I entered lots and lots of competitions. I also had just the luck that my teacher conducted the youth orchestra at Cal Arts at the pre-college. So I was involved from the age of 10 in the pre-college division, playing chamber music, primarily piano trios. I almost never played quartets until I got into college because
Hmm.
there wasn't a violist my age. That's the typical problem we have as string players is finding that right combination. But my best friend was a pianist, and so I played lots and lots of piano trios, and I really had in my mind that I would make either a solo and or chamber music career. And at Juilliard, discovered, there's a lot of really good players out there. It's a pretty competitive world. But I still did a lot of international competitions. I went to Tchaikovsky competition in I don't even know what year it was, maybe 86, and I made it to the semifinal round. So I felt like I had some chops going on there. But when all was said and done, I managed to get into a string quartet, the Colorado Quartet, and I spent 21 years with them. And we toured all over the world. We made recordings, and it was a wonderful, wonderful thing for me. There were some funny things that happened being in a quartet because although I'd had some quartet experience both undergraduate and graduate, I had continued to really think of the piano trio as the paragon of playing because I have soloistic tendencies, I guess. And when you play in a piano trio, you're a soloist. I mean, you have a piano, and the piano makes a certain amount of sound, and you have to carry your sound over it. So it's not so much about blending as other kinds of playing. It's about playing soloistically. And it was really interesting joining a professional quartet that when I joined had already been together for 5 or 6 years and was really established and had a sound and had a way to do things. And I was already in my early 30s and I felt like I really knew a lot about playing, and I had to swallow a certain amount of that pride. There were even rhythmic things I discovered that I couldn't do to the exacting standard of a string quartet, and definitely sounds I had to learn to make and blending. And what I came to recognize is that the string quartet is perhaps the vehicle that combines all the kinds of playing that we do. You have to be a soloist. You have to be an incredibly malleable team player. You have to be able to blend. You have to understand when to support a lot, when to support a little, when to be incredibly rhythmically precise. And it pulls in so many kinds of musicianship, and asks you to do that in a really individualistic manner. So I loved being in a string quartet, and I loved the repertoire. I loved playing that, and that's what I really did for a really long time. We taught at Bard College in New York State. We traveled all over the place. And then in 2009, when the economy started tanking and we didn't have a teaching degree anymore, I decided to jettison my way out of New York. So I'd been in New York that whole time, and come to I played in the Colorado Quartet, but we were based in New York City. And I came to Portland, Oregon. And it's a funny thing when you leave one career that has been pretty well established and you go into a really unknown zone, that can be really hard. And so one of the things that I had picked up along the way playing in the quartet was administrative skills, which they teach that in college. Now they do teach you some business skills, they teach you some computer skills. It's really important to have them, and I mostly developed them on my own. I ran a summer program with the quartet for many, many years called Soundfest on Cape Cod, and I did all the stuff, all the publicity, all the print materials, all the computer stuff. So I sort of taught myself how to do admin work. So when I came to Portland, I took a job with the Metropolitan Youth Symphony here, and I worked there for 3 years. And initially, I didn't want to tell people who I would meet in a cellistic way that I was even doing this, because it was an office job and I was a little embarrassed as someone who'd been a self-supporting performing musician for most of my career, to be working in an office felt like a big step down. But what I learned actually doing that, was that many, many musicians do combination careers, and that I was supporting music. I was supporting young people. I learned so much. It was a great entree to a new city because I learned where all the concerts happen. I learned who all the music teachers were. I learned how the students were best supported. And so that was a great experience for me. And then I built my own teaching studio enough, and I started touring with the Portland Cello Project, which is my main performance group now. And it's kind of a crossover group, if you will. We do a lot of non-classical things. That was one of my goals coming to Portland, which is a cool liberal city, if you will, was to kind of break out of my string quartet mold of playing all the greatest works of the Western culture and do other fun things. So on our recent tour, for instance, we played a Taylor Swift song reimagined for cellos, and it was haunting and beautiful and really wonderful to play. So we do a lot of interesting things there. I do a lot of teaching. I do a lot of online teaching, and I do. Um, I'll give you details later, but I have an ongoing live stream that I do, and I do a lot of concerto work now, or maybe not a lot, but I do enough. I do a full schedule for me of concerto work. So I feel like I really have had several different kinds of careers through my life, and I think that when I look at my early training, I can see how all the different facets of my training really prepared me to roll with the punches.
Outstanding, outstanding. Boy, do I have a lot of questions. The piano trio
Of that.
repertoire. The piano trio repertoire. It's not just that the blending priority when you have strings that can just absolutely disappear into each other's sound when you want. That is obviously different. But I think the way that composers wrote for us cellists in piano trios is also very different, is much more like it just kind of an ongoing triple concerto whenever they want to head that direction. And as opposed to the string quartet, where I can imagine what you're talking about, especially as a cellist coming into an established quartet. A quartet can have a very clear philosophy about even things like the way that the tuning happens, because there are groups that always want to kind of tune from the bass, and then there are groups that tune from the root. So when you don't have the root of the chord, are you the go-to, or do you start with the person who has the root and then tune from there? And just even the amount that,
And that's
go ahead.
yeah, that's variable. It kind of depends. I mean, you can't, to a certain extent, we tuned to the lowest voice, except when we didn't. But what
I
I was going
love
to
it.
say
I
about
love it.
tuning is the difference between how high is a major third
Yeah.
can be, and then when different people in the group, some people want it really high and some people want it sort of piano keyboard high. That can be just even figuring out how what a major chord sounds like can be a giant can of worms in a group.
And then administrative skills, self-taught by and large administrative skills. Do you have suggestions for youngsters out there who, whether they realize it or not, would benefit from picking up on such skills as to how you went about that?
Yeah, I think that as a player, as a young player, the number one first important thing you can do uh, for yourself to gain, you know, knowledge and control is write program notes every single time you perform. Know about your piece, talk about the pieces, be able to talk about the music, not just because your music history teacher told you you have to write an assignment, but like do the research on your piece and write it down, write it like it's going to be an essay. And I think that was that I started writing program notes for pieces. And what I discovered was if I wrote program notes for pieces and I spent a bunch of time making them sound really good, I could talk about the piece really easily. If I only read stuff, things were jumbled. And there's something about the writing process. So that's the first place I would start is write notes about pieces. When you're playing a concert, write your publicity. Learn how to write your bio, learn how to write your resume, learn how to do all those things that support your personal playing. And then from there, when there's opportunities to if you're writing your own publicity, you learn how to set where the places are that you send that publicity, how you get posted online, how you get maybe someone to review a concert. You start doing more bits of research about how to amass that kind of skill. And then I mean there's the online presence of figuring out how to get something on the web. And there's a lot of websites that are very helpful nowadays. I use Wix because they have templates, they have easy things. I know a lot of people use WordPress. Make your own web page. Make a web page about you, about what you're doing, your concerts. It doesn't even have to be solo concerts. I have lots of friends that post, they play in orchestras and they post the orchestra concerts on the web page. But just, getting a presence that is manipulating, that is giving publicity. I mean, that's kind of what admin stuff is getting your brand out in the world.
Yeah, outstanding. All right. So Tchaikovsky competition and other competitions in which you placed or won, to practice a piece to where it's pretty darn good and then awfully good and then very good, and then you still have to keep going. Do you have some suggestions as to how you would practice a piece that you were about to enter into the Tchaikovsky competition?
Yeah, I think for me and my process, I I use practice charts. I don't use them anymore because I'm pretty good at keeping stuff in my head now, but I extensively used practice charts when I was doing big competitions. And I did go, like, I went to Italy, to Chile, to the Netherlands. I went around doing international competitions because that was what was driving me. I'm a person that needs a goal. I do. I don't practice very well if I don't have something. I need a recital, I need a competition, an audition, something. And you can make concerts all the time. You can go play in nursing homes. You can uh, do, obviously, at a school, you can set up concerts. You can set up concerts in somebody's living room. And so what I would do before competitions is perform really a lot over and over and over the repertoire. And then each time you perform it, you can see, oh, well, I thought I really had practiced that a lot, but when I got nervous, this happened. I lost my bow control, or my vibrato got too fast, or all my high position stuff just tanked. And you learn what happens to you when you're nervous, or and when you tighten up, which is not something you can learn sitting in your practice room. Absolutely cannot. So it's really important to figure out how you need to practice things to be able to deal with what the things are that happen in performance. How do I conquer that issue that I just had, where I felt like somebody put somebody else's left hand on my finger, on my somebody else's left hand on my arm every time I went up into thumb position. And I mean, the lesson I learned from that, which did happen to me once, was that I had to practice more times my high position things. So I've developed a few things that I do. I do percentage drills, is what I call them. So if I have a passage, and it can be one shift, or it can be a whole line. I mean, it could. I think it's important to keep it something small, maybe a bar, a measure, couple measures, a line of music at the most. And I want to play it, quote unquote, perfectly. In other words, I want to play it to the level that I would like to play it in performance. And that might mean when I first start practicing it that I'm doing it really slowly, and maybe I'm just doing 3 notes. I'm doing some shift up to a note. If I can do it 3 times in a row, that's my first goal. Like, perfectly, 3 times in a row. So if it might take me 8 times to do it 3 times in a row. Sometimes you have to just do it. Can I do it 3 times? Can I do it 3 times today, not in a row? That's maybe the first place. Then can I do it 3 times in a row? Can I do it 5 times in a row? Can I do it 10 times in a row? And that's really hard to do when it's something difficult. And what you are doing there, this is a short-term goal, and this is one of the ways that I teach and recognize in my own playing, that the short-term goal is how we piecemeal things together, so we have the confidence, because it's not just about trusting that my hand is going to do it. I mean, obviously that's part of it, but my brain. I have developed this confidence in my brain, because I know that 10 times, if I can do it 10 times in a row, that's 100%. And I might lose a little bit of percentage in concert, but probably I'm going to play it pretty well in concert if I can do it regularly 10 times in a row. So that is a lot of pulling apart of things, even when you have them at a very high level. I also find that when I have a kind of a routine of how I learn things. When I'm doing something that is memorized, which would be anything for a really big concert, a concerto. I always memorize my concertos. When you're doing competitions, auditions, often it's nice to be memorized. That's my first goal, is memorizing the piece. I want to be able to, I want to be able to get from start to finish in a mostly memorized form. Every once in a while, there's a couple things that are a little bit out, but I don't worry about speed. I don't worry about clarity. I even sometimes don't worry. I'm like, okay, whoop, that was out of tune. It's okay. It's memorized. We're working on the memory. And I get the piece in my brain first. And one of the reasons for that is, the earlier I can have it memorized, the more times I can play it from memory, which means by the time I get to the concert, if I memorized that piece 2 months before the concert, I probably played it 50 times memorized before I walk out on stage. And so my confidence, again, I'm talking about building confidence. My confidence on my memory is great. If I am a week before the performance still working on my memory, that sometimes doesn't feel very confident to me. That would be a little nervous making. So my priority when I learn something is to try to get it memorized. Now, if it's going to be something that I'm not going to memorize, which often we do recitals with unmemorized music, and I do a monthly live stream where I don't memorize the music, then my primary goal is getting from start to finish. Can I play the whole thing all the way through in some way, shape, or form? It's probably going to be under tempo. I may have some sloppy passage work and some out of tune things or notes that I miss, but I want to feel like I've got the body of the work without stopping. And so then I inform my practice with the I keep falling apart in this bar. How can I get through this bar without stopping? And maybe the answer is I go really slowly in this section. So I invent okay, I'm going to make it sound like I think musically this section goes slow. Even though I know I don't want to play it that slowly, I'm going to convince you, the audience, that this is my belief. This section is slow. And I slow it down, and then I can play it and I don't fumble through it. And eventually, if I have enough time to practice it, I will get it to the tempo I want. So there are these little tricks that you develop about getting through things.
I love the strategic approach. I love the intentionality of it all. I have to admit, there's an element of concentration that you clearly have. I'm thinking of a video I saw of you on YouTube where you're playing, I think it's Shostakovich, while there's just all manner of drum and
the drums
cacophony going on, and yet you're still 100% on task of what you're doing. It doesn't distract you in the least.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun thing to actually do to see if I could stay on task. And I did play that Shostakovich concerto in December here in the Portland area with an orchestra. So that was in the early going. That was like in September. So that was a few months out. I was not at the totally memorized place yet, but trying to play the piece every day, and that was where I happened to be that day. So
well, but would you say also that the concentration, so young people watching this only wear the shoe if it fits, but sometimes their mind is somewhat elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? When they practice?
So is mine. I mean, yes, when I practice, so is mine, and it's hard. And there is yeah, that's hard. I think that for me, I'm just like feel that I've just gone through that this week, where I had, as I mentioned, I have this weekly monthly live stream that I do. So every single month I'm learning new repertoire, and some of it's hard. It's usually about 30 minutes of music per month. So that's you know ha sort of half a recital, maybe not quite, depends how long your recitals are. And the concerts usually last about 40 minutes because I talk between all the pieces. And I don't memorize these pieces usually, but it's brand new music every single month. And so I'm learning 12, 30-minute recitals every year. I've been doing this for 3 solid years. So this is one of the things that came out of the pandemic that I am really proud of and really still happy doing, is this reinventing yourself kind of thing of, okay, what can I do now? Like, I'm stuck at home. For a while, actually, I did Bach suites with accompaniment. That you may or may not know that more than one person wrote piano parts that go along with the Bach suites. Because in the Romantic era, they were a little confused about Bach suites. They thought they were sort of like exercises. They wanted everything to sound full and juicy, and so people wrote piano accompaniments, and I think they actually sound terrible when you play them with a cello and a piano. I don't like them at all. I think they're really corny. But I started arranging the piano parts for cello ensemble, for like 4 accompanying cellos plus the solo cello, and making videos of myself. You can find them on my website, where I'm in the center and then 4 of me is around playing the accompanying parts. And I think they sound gorgeous. I really, really, really like them. So I've done suites 1, 2, 3, 5. No, not 5. So 1, 2, 3, and 6 that way. And uh, so that was the first thing I did during the pandemic. Then I broke my elbow in August 2020, and that put me really off course for a little while. I'm happy to report that I'm like fully functional. I will never be able to bend this elbow as much as I can this one. So it doesn't bend all the way. It doesn't straighten all the way, but it plays the cello. And I know I'm slightly off course about concentration, but I'm coming to the concentration point, which there's a determination also, I think, that goes along with concentration. So I broke my elbow. in the end of August 2020, I had surgery. I have 13 screws and 3 bars in my elbow. They had to actually make more damage to repair it. Um, that happened at the first week of September. 6 weeks later, I asked the doctor, can I play the cello? He said yes. So I made a video, I think that day I came home from the doctor, and all I could play was, because I couldn't bend my arm. So I could play here. I played I played, I think this, kind of like that, out of tune, just like exactly like that. I played an A major scale right there. I don't even know if I came back down the scale. My hand was so weak, and I couldn't bend my arm at all. It was in a brace. It's like this. I did a Facebook Live, and I said, here's my cello playing. By the time I got to, so I did it at 6 weeks. I think at 8 weeks, I maybe played a little violin concerto, a Vivaldi violin concerto, like a student concerto, because I could play in thumb position. I was trying to build my strength, and so I was coming in. I couldn't even play every day at first, maybe every other day, and pushing my hand, pushing my arm, and figuring out what can I do with my arm not able to go anywhere near first position. Strangely, the piece that I was able to play first was Elfantons by Popper. I was looking for, I know it's ridiculous because it's such, for those of you who don't know, it's one of the hardest virtuoso pieces, but it's really high. And I had to modify the low stuff. I couldn't play the octaves. I just played one note of it because I couldn't go past. I think I could go maybe down to fourth position by that point. I couldn't go lower, but I was getting my fingers to work. So I had this determination and concentration to get myself back to playing. And 3 months after the surgery, I think three and a half months, I did a live stream where I played a piece. And if you hadn't known I had broken my elbow, you would not have recognized that I was still kind of pulling myself away from the cello when I went into low positions. But that I have a motivation and a determination to play that I think comes through in concentration. So, part of it is deciding that you're going to do what you're doing. Maybe sometimes concentration is about having those short-term goals, like the goal being I'm going to play through this, or I'm going to vibrate on every note, or I'm going to play this piece and I'm going to keep my bow straight the whole time. I mean, it can be something super simple. It doesn't have to be super fancy. But when we get into the I'll play through this piece vagueness, that sometimes I think that is where our brain starts to wander. And I know for me, when I don't have people aren't watching me, it's not a performance, sometimes it's hard to do. So one of the things that I do a lot is imagine people watching me. I imagine I'm on a stage or I'm in front of a camera, because I do a lot of live streaming now. I'm going to play this piece as if someone were watching me. And I think that that's a very valuable tool to help develop concentration.
Yes.
That was a very long answer about concentration. I wasn't expecting to talk about my elbow during that, but that's where that went.
No, I love it. I love it. So, and when you watch people, when you imagine people watching you, you have a very specific vision of what you want to sound like in front of those people.
Yeah, I do. And I have a very specific vision. That's a funny thing, a vision of what I want them to sound like. I have an oral thought of, but I also have a vision. Like when I imagine myself playing in front of people, I am dressed nicely. I have lights on me. I'm on a stage. I generally don't imagine it like I'm sitting in my studio and somebody's sitting in the corner. I put myself in a very professional. You can put yourself in Carnegie Hall. You can put yourself wherever it's important to you, in your recital hall, at your school. It could be in your living room if you're about to do a living room concert and that's something that's making you nervous. But um, I think that that's important. And the other thing is recording yourself. If you're someone that sometimes doesn't feel like you have enough performance experience, have trouble concentrating, recording is great. And it also is a way for you to look and see what you need to work on. That's another really important tool for the what am I supposed to work on now? I can play this piece. What should I work on? And then you record yourself and you say, oh, that some of my shifts I thought my shifts were better than that. I kind of, that was out of tune when I shifted. I didn't even notice it when I played. Oh, my sound got scratchy there. Oh, that's not very smooth. I mean, just there's a million things that you notice when you record. And so because of that, lots of people don't like to record them. Oops. So lots of people don't like to record themselves because they don't want to see it. That's sort of limiting.
Yes. Excellent point. Another excellent point. Another question. So going from the piano trio, where the level of blend, the default level is kind of one thing, and then a string quartet where it's higher. And now the Portland Cello Project, I mean, cellos blending with other cellos can be even a greater blend than a string quartet. Do you
Yeah.
have
So
some?
this,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So this is either I have a dual answer here. Answer
Okay.
number one is we're amplified.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
90% of the time we're amplified. So that is different because someone out in the hall is actually doing mixing and he's turning us up and down. And sometimes it's like, so we're part rock band, really. And sometimes the sound guy will turn like the person he knows the repertoire, he's heard us play, he has lists of who has solos in certain things. And so if someone has a solo in something, they'll turn their sound up. So we can't hear each other very well on stage either because a lot of times, and it partly depends on what the circumstances of what thing is that we're playing. Some of the more things that are just cellos by themselves or in a really nice hall, sometimes we'll turn the monitors off so that we can't hear the artificial cello sound coming back, but we're still usually amplified out into the hall. So we don't have a sense of what's going on in the hall.
Hmm.
Do you ever anyway?
Mhm.
But at least we can hear each other and blend on stage. So yes, we do work on blend. When we rehearse without amplification, but a lot of the time we also play with bass and drums, trombone. So there's a lot of other sound going on. So we're a little bit of a mixed bag. When we rehearse just cellos, I've done a lot of cello ensemble playing. I love playing in cello ensemble. I think it's a fabulous mix. We do spend a lot of time talking about, like in a quartet, that the bass needs to be solid. The bass needs to be the most solid. And people who are playing higher things that aren't melody need to shut up because they need to blend because they're playing what would essentially be like a second violin part or a viola part. But on the cello, like if the first cello is playing pretty high and the second, third cello voices are in maybe fourth position, or they're kind of on the A string with notes that are going da 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 da, or something that is not a melody, it's really easy for those notes to poke out. So that's a hard skill, is to play things that are in really projecting areas of the cello, but to play them with a blendy sound can be really hard.
Okay.
Lots of
So
lots of floaty bow.
yeah, that leads me nicely, I think, segue wise, into another question I have, which is how did you get into arranging? And and did the sorts of things that you were noticing that worked well in the various, not only the various chamber music ensembles, but orchestral playing, etc., inform your approach to arranging?
Yeah, I have a slightly complicated answer for that. I guess all my answers are slightly complicated. So my father was a theory teacher and arranger. He arranged music and wrote original compositions for salsa bands in LA. And then he was a theory teacher of serious music and a composer who, I mean, he wrote some pieces. His pieces were very abstract and obtuse and did not have success, and he couldn't figure out really how to write in a way that people really liked. I mean, he's passed now, so I can say this, and I love him and I love his music. The things that are the most successful are the pieces he wrote for me when I was a young student cellist, and I have published lots of those because some of them are really sweet. um, he I would ask him things about arranging. He had me, when I started doing Bach suites, he sat me down and wrote in Roman numerals underneath the bars, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I think it was like 10 when I started doing the G major suite, and I was like, I don't get these Roman numerals words that we're doing. But I do my Bach. I do did analyze Bach suites a lot to as a way to figure out like how important is this? Oh, look, it's the same chord for bars and bars and bars. I should stop making a big deal out of this part there. Look, key change, chord change. Okay, this is important. And I do speak a little bit about harmony with students. But even when I was in high school, I started doing cello arrangements. I have a when I was like, I don't know, 9 or something, I wrote a piece. Um, oh, I'll show you some of it.
Excellent.
It was something like horsey, I don't know what key. Horsey, 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 take a big ride over the mountains and the tide. Horsey, horsey, take a big ride. We we goes horsey, and then I would and then I played it, and I remember my mother. I'm not obviously I don't remember how the whole thing went, but I sang the song and played the pizzicato. It's a song we sing to babies in the family still, and I put it in one of my books that I published, calling it a horse ride. Uh, I was highly embarrassed. My mother told the school that told the music teacher that I had written this, and I was about 9 years old, and they made me go do it in front of them. He stuck me on the stage and made me do it in front of the whole elementary school. I
I'll
was
bet they loved it.
not that happy, maybe, but we do not have a video of that, sadly. That would be wouldn't that be a fabulous thing to have? But we do not have a video of that. Yeah, no, I don't remember being very happy about it. But so that was, from square one, I was writing things. I wrote cello arrangements that are bad in high school and college. They're muddy, they're low, there are too many low voices all glumped together. And then I think the next thing that I did a lot of arranging about was when I started running a music festival, with the quartet, the Colorado Quartet, and we would have students, we would have groups that are like, how can we make if we're going to have 4 violins and a cello in this group, because we have no viola players and there's too many violinists and we don't want to not accept students. Okay, what are we going to give these people if 4 violins and a cello? And I thought, well, let me look at some like string quintets that are for 2 violins, 2 violas and a cello. I could probably take those 2 viola parts and turn them into violin parts. And with 3 violins and 2 cellos, we can definitely work. And so I started doing arrangements where I would take parts that belonged to other instruments and rework them. So I have a huge amount of student chamber music for really weird combinations. I have things like quintets for 2 violins and 3 cellos, and just weird things, so that whatever grouping you have, I have pieces for you, strings. And from there, I think it was a kind of a natural to start doing. I know, because I taught at a private boys school in Manhattan for a very long time called the Alan Stevenson School. It was a wonderful school with a wonderful music program where the teachers come to the school during the day and you just take the kids out of classes. You're right there and you do lots and lots and lots of kids. And so I started writing cello ensembles for my students there. That's how I started writing. So like baby cello ensembles, again, that would match the levels of the kids that I had, and then gradually started expanding that idea. But early things were not always successful. They were muddy and weird, and you learned if you put too many low parts at close harmonies with each other, it doesn't sound good. There used to be a little bit of clarity between the voices.
Excellent. Yeah, experience is an excellent teacher, isn't it? Just trial and error.
Well, that's it. Yeah, especially for that kind of arranging. So.
Uh-huh. Well, okay, so the topic of motivating students to practice. I mean, of course, there are certain students that just never seem to need that talk. But then there are others that, even if most of the time they're motivated, they just either hit some sort of a point where they need help convincing them of that they should keep practicing and how they should go about doing it. Do you have some go-tos for motivating your students that you'd share?
Um, I think my motivation tactics tend to be more centered around what I've spoken about goals, about I think it's based on me. I don't practice if I don't have something coming up. I mean, I just don't. I sort of play around with stuff. Oh, I'll play through this etude today. Oh, I'll play through this piece today. I need to say, oh, in 2 months, I'm going to play this in front of people. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be, I mean, depending on what age of student, are you asking about college students specifically or
Any student.
high school students? Or, yeah, the I think having accountability that you're going to play for other people, I think is really there's this human desire. It is the survival of the fittest thing that we want to show what we've done. We want to be praised. We want to be thought of as worthy. We want to be seen as smart, as skilled, as people who worked at something and have something to show for it. I mean, that's a very, very common, normal human thing. So even for people who don't practice a lot, they still that can still kick in, and sometimes then they're very disappointed. They're like, well, let me show you what I've been doing, and then if they haven't practiced, they can kind of fall on their face and be sad about that. um, but hopefully they can pick themselves up and say, okay, well, I've got to practice in order to get ready for this. So for instance, during the pandemic, when people were not having any concerts, not having any youth orchestras. I mean, that's another thing, is playing in an ensemble can be for some students who aren't interested in doing solo playing and they're really not interested in playing for other people. If they have orchestra, they have a string quartet or something where they need to learn music for that and they want to play well in that ensemble, that can be enough to keep them, maybe playing a scale every day so that they're continuing to improve their technique. But during the pandemic, I did weekly classes for all my students. I did 3 different levels of classes, and I just made them. You this week, everyone is playing a movement of Bach for the advanced class. This week, everyone is playing one line from an exercise for the little kids. I mean, it's just like every single week they showed up, and everyone played in class every week. And that was actually maybe more playing for people than a lot of them had done, really. And some weeks it would be play a scale. For the beginners, they played a 1 octave scale, and everybody played their scale for everybody. And so that was, again, bouncing with what you have, trying to be inventive in certain circumstances. And I don't have the wherewithal to do that every week. That would be really a lot to do it with people in person, gathering them. But in a school setting, uh, in my undergraduate, we had cello class every week, and that it was a place where you could go play an etude you were working on or play a page of a piece or whatever kind of thing. But sometimes I've had students who've done things like they have their peers and they form a group of 3 people or 4 people that play instruments. Doesn't have to be the same instrument, and they just decide every other week or once a month or whatever that they're going to play for each other, whatever they're working on. Just, I mean, it can be as casual as that, but I think accountability is a great motivator. And I don't have that many ideas for like you're sitting at home and deciding you're going to practice because it's fun, because practicing is not always fun.
All right.
And I think that that's important to acknowledge, that it's not, I mean, sometimes it's a drag, sometimes it's quite a drag. And so that's where the practice chart thing
Uh-huh.
is sometimes really helpful. And when I break out a practice chart, so examples, depending again of whether it's an advanced student or a beginning student, that I have them in my computer, all these different kinds of things. So I will write on my chart. It will say, I'll break it down into different sections. So let's say scales, and then you write in what key of a scale you did. And if you're an advanced player, you might be doing a different scale every day. If you're most students, you're going to maybe carry a scale for a week, and I might write scale, arpeggio, broken thirds. For more advanced students, maybe they're doing some double stops, and maybe you put a check if you did it that day.
Mhm.
Um, Same thing with etude, with method books or exercises, that a simple check. That when I get to repertoire, though, I break it out farther. And depending again on how complicated the repertoire is, if it's a less experienced person, so that it'll just have like, their piece, and then it will say, I'll give them a few choices. It'll be like maybe learning, memorizing, play through, and drills or something like that. And so, depending on what point they are in the piece, if they're learning the piece and they're having to stop and start and figure out what the fingerings are, and they don't just, then they put a check on learning. If maybe polishing is one of those as well. If they have been working on the piece already for a little while and they have it mostly memorized and they're working on making it sound great, then they can put a check on memorizing and polishing. But so it's an accountability chart. So you can look at this chart and you can say in the middle of the week, you look at your chart and you say, I didn't practice my etude yet this week. And this is like practice day number 4. Oops, I better practice my etude the rest of the week. So there's that. And there's also, as you're dealing with the repertoire and you're saying, well, all I do is stop and start when I practice this piece, I should play through. I'm going to play through it without stopping, and then I can put a check in playthrough. So I use practice charts like that a lot for myself and sometimes for my students. And that depends on the person. Some people hate charts. Some people really like putting the X's. It's like, I put X's in my boxes today. That can be a great motivator.
Yeah, excellent. Adds structure, adds intentionality. Yeah. All right. So, Diane, projects, performances coming up in 2024.
Okay, so I mentioned I just did a Shostakovich one with an orchestra pretty much exactly a month ago. It was like December 6th, right? Yeah, so just pretty close to a month ago. I have this month I am playing a really interesting cello concerto, the only one that I know of written in the Romantic era by a woman. This is the French composer Marie Jaël, and that is January 26th and 28th here in the Portland area, an orchestra called the Beaverton Symphony. Beaverton is a suburb of Portland. And that's been a really interesting piece to put together, because there are existing parts. The manuscript is in a very messy condition. It exists, and they have scanned it. You can get access to it online, which I did. There's a missing movement, semi-missing. It appears that the piece had a couple different incarnations, and that Marie Jaël wrote an original slow movement that then got replaced. So the orchestral parts that they have in manuscript have the second version of the slow movement, but the cello part and the piano reduction that she wrote have the original slow movement. So there's 2 slow movements. One of them is like a funeral march, and the other one is a little bit lighter. And I love the depth of a funeral march sound. It's sad, it's slow. That was the one that seems to have been rejected, so I orchestrated it. There were a few pages. You could see that she had orchestrated it as well, but the manuscript was lost or destroyed or whatever. But there were the first 4 pages of the score for that movement are part of this library collection that you can get online. And so I could see what her intentions were for that movement. And I know that she had it orchestrated with the intention of the orchestra playing it, and for whatever reason rejected it, or the cellist maybe rejected it. Anyway, so I'm going to be performing that piece, I believe, possibly the first time ever with that movement. So I'm going to do it with both slow movements, and just make the second slow movement, which is the one in the major key, sound a little bit more scherzando-like, and the first of the slow movements sound really funeral march. So I have completed her orchestration for that movement. So that's exciting, because it's sort of it's a West Coast premiere of the piece, plus probably the very first time that this interesting movement that she intended to be part of the piece is being played. So that's my next big thing. I continue with my themed live streams every month. For February, it's Black History Month, and so I have pulled out 5 pieces by composers that are names probably unknown to most people. And this is one of the reasons I'm doing these live streams. There is so much solo cello music available and out there, and it's wonderful, wonderful music, and it's virtually unknown. So some of the composers on my February concert are Eleanor Alberga, a Black composer, um, Quinn Mason. Just these names that they're not recognized composers. In March, it's Women's History Month, and I'll do works by three women, including Nancy Ives, the principal cello of the Oregon Symphony, who wrote a piece that she plays, and she has passed it along to me, that involves singing while you play the cello. So that's fun to develop different techniques as you play. Yeah. So I have all this repertoire that I'm learning every month for the live streams. And then the next concerto after this Jael one in June, I'm playing another very unknown concerto. It is called the Tchaikovsky Casado Concerto. So Gaspar Casado, a Spanish composer from the early 20th century, wrote a full concerto based on Tchaikovsky piano pieces. It sounds exactly like a Tchaikovsky concerto, but it's not. I mean, the music, the themes are all written by Tchaikovsky, but the concerto is by Casado. But it's a sounds like a full length Tchaikovsky concerto, and it's absolutely fabulous. And it's very puzzling to me that it is an unknown work. This will be the second time I'm getting to play it, so I'm excited about that.
That's great. What's the Piatigorsky quote about Rostropovich playing the same 50 concertos over and over and over? You know, I mean, the point being that there are more cello concertos out there than a lot of people recognize. We have more than the Haydn and the Saint-Saëns, the Dvorak and the Shostakovich and the Schumann.
Yeah, and you know, the my whole life I have wanted to play the things nobody else plays. I mean, from a really early age, I have been the person going to libraries, pawing through people's music to try to find pieces that nobody else plays. I have a lot of music that are things that I have accumulated from the Library of Congress that I've gone and copied music. So this monthly live stream that I do, I play so little standard music. I don't play Bach suites at all on it. Other people can play Bach suites, but I scheduled the Casado suite for the first time in my life. I've never performed it, but I'm going to do it on a live stream this year. I was like, I should play a little tiny bit of standard music once in a while.
But it
So
is it is so fun, I think, also audiences' responses to a piece that they've never even knew existed. You know, just like, wow, who has been hiding this gem from me all my life, sort of a thing.
yeah,
Very nice. More power to you. All right.
thanks.
Well, thanks so much, Diane. This is just an enormous amount of great thoughts and ideas that I hope all the viewers out there have fun unpacking and mulling over all weekend long, all week long, until we meet again at 5 o'clock next Friday for another cello chat.
Great. And can I just mention a couple things? So
Please.
you can go, yeah, you can go see I play my live streams the first Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. West Coast time. Those live streams stay up on my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. So even if you don't catch it when it runs live, the one I did in January, which has Eastern spiritual music on it, is up on my YouTube page. I do have two YouTube pages. I have one that is Diane Chaplin Cello that has my performing, but I have another one called Cello Refinery. See, I didn't even talk about all these other things that I did. So I have this giant library of videos that are teaching videos. So if you have something you're working on, I bet I have a video about it. And if I don't, if people write comments, I'm happy. I have both long videos and I've been doing lots of shorts lately where I just get 1 minute to talk about something. Like the most recent one I put up was talking about the 3 octave scale pattern of that 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 on the top, and just negotiating that and just talk about it for like a minute. And you can go get little tips on technique. That's called Cello Refinery. And I also actually run a once a month 1 hour online class for anybody that's interested in. It's an adult class but adult is sort of a vague term for anyone who wants a little technique boosts.
Perfect. We will put all of those links in with this.
Perfect.
Great.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks again. And I know I want to go and practice.
I know I'm going to go practice too. I've got myself all inspired. Yeah.
Terrific. Terrific. All right. Take care.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank
Okay.
you. Goodbye. Get me a jello.